I'm Randy Borman. I was born and reared with the Cofán people here in Ecuador. My parents were missionaries that originally came to the area in the early 50s of the 20th century. And by the time I was out of high school and in college years, the oil companies had moved into the region, and my people, the people that I grew up with, the Cofans, the village of Dureno, were caught right dead center in the middle of all this activity. And all of a sudden, our rivers were polluted, our forests were being cut down. We had really very, very little concept of land ownership, of territories or anything like that, because we never needed it. And we began trying to get some sort of legal protection from the Ecuadorian government. And eventually we're able to get a letter from the president of in that era, stating that the Cofans had the right to an area, kind of a nebulous area between two small rivers on the Aguarico. We went up to the land office to try to formalize it, and we found out we weren't even Ecuadorian citizens. We had wound up at 1974 as non-entities. And then by 84, we had recovered a little bit, and we were beginning to understand how to deal with the outside world. But it wasn't until the 90s that we were able to actually confront the oil companies in any solid way and begin to impose on the oil companies some sort of regulation, some sort of legality, some sort of push to try to be able to maintain our way of life and our forests in a way that could be understood by the outside world. In 1998, I was privileged to be awarded the Parker Gentry Award, which was via the Field Museum for Conservation Biology. And that served kind of as a springboard to being able to access more support from the outside. And one of the people who contacted me during that time was, in his previous life, he had been a corporate lawyer. He stepped up alongside of us and said, we can do a 501c3. And so that was the beginning of the Fundación Cofán, Fundación Sobrevivencia Cofán. And once we had that platform, we were able to access funding with the help of the Field Museum and other friends. I always kid people and say we went on the modern 20th century war path. But we were able to recover legal rights to about 430,000 hectares of land, which is about 1 million acres during the period between 2000 and 2010. And we were also successful in putting together training Cofán park guards from all of our different communities, Cofán communities, that allowed us to bring that 430,000 hectares through the first 10 years of our tenure, of our being legally in charge of it, with zero deforestation. During the same time period, the Ministry of Environment in the country lost about 15% of the areas under their control. At that time, we were able to do it for about 40 cents per hectare per year. One of the great bargains of the world, when you consider that because that 430,000 hectares was intact, the impact of that last hurricane was less, several $1 million less in damages,
Yeah, so my name is Felipe Borman. Currently, I'm working as project manager here at the Fundación. As co-fonds, we live off of our land. The forest provides what we need for the most part. we've had to figure out how the Western world works, how the economic world works. That's changed a little bit our relationship to our lands, but the biggest issue is the urban world trying to integrate us completely into their system. Having our land, we've been able to resist it and continue our way of life.
I should mention that his mom, my wife, is Cofán. She was raised by her grandparents, who were a very, very strongly traditional, very powerfully correct example of the older Cofán generation. So that's another thing that's been deeply part of the whole Fundación and starting in the 70s, when we were just trying to figure out how to deal with the outside world, period. One of the things that we found out real quickly was that in Ecuador, the idea of a boundary trail was important. It didn't matter whether you actually had a legal title to back it or anything else, but you made a trail and put stakes on it with red paint, and it was considered a legally binding way of grabbing land. And so we went out and started making boundary trails. It meant cutting physical trails through the forest for weeks at a time. It meant having to patrol those areas frequently to make sure that they weren't having incursions on them. The patrols were 5-man patrols, or 5 men and women, because a lot of women were involved as well. But we would mix different villages so that villages no longer felt had the sense of, oh, we're isolated from the rest of the Cofán community, but we're actually part of the whole thing. And we also mixed ages. So we would have a older person in the group that could tell the stories at nighttime when everybody was sleeping out in the jungle, and younger people who were then able to assimilate this knowledge. 2003, we were able to get a mandate from the government that created Cofán community park guards as an entity, as legal entities that could have basically the same rights as and responsibilities as the national park guards. The huge advantage that we had over the national park guards was that our people already knew the forest. And so you didn't have to try to figure out how they were going to find their way back from after they got out in the middle of no place. The idea of camping out for 3 weeks at a time is not scary. We're right on the Colombian border, and we have had a lot of problems with subversive groups, narcotics, traffic stuff going through our territories and everything like that, which in the case of the Cofáns, it's much easier for Cofáns to continue to move and continue to provide protection for an area. I mean, they actually enjoy being out there. It's not a scary, difficult thing. Now you give those people basic conservation tools, you give them formats for doing biological surveys, things like that, and they're on top of it. They know exactly what they're doing. The outsider coming in from the outside has to begin from scratch with not knowing any of the sounds, not knowing any of the tracks, not knowing any of and it takes a whole lot longer. Unfortunately, like I say, we lost most of the funding for the project during the 2013, 2012, 2013. And we're able to live several years off of just the reputation of the park guards. Everybody knew that if you tried to get into the Cofán territories, there was going to be a patrol coming along pretty quick. And we have buy-in from other communities. That's the other thing. If I had the budget, I could probably get 10 million hectares of rainforest under strong conservation principle managed control within 2 years. The park guard program that we developed is tailor made for Indigenous groups because it was made by us. It was invented by us. I mean, it was, with a clear idea of what the needs are at the community level, what the possibilities are for the community people to take it over. But
the Cofán lands are divided into 6 blocks. It used to be one single land, but now because of all the towns, cities, colonization, oil company, we're down to 6 blocks. So Cofán Bermejo is 1 block. It's got 55,000 hectares. It's been a territory that's been a little different from the rest of the Cofán territories since it's inside a reserve. It's completely, only Cofans are in that reserve. So when the reserve was created, it was written in a way that the Cofán
we're supposed to be the co-administrators.
were the co-administrators of this land. We've got other Cofán territories that are also in other reserves, but most of the other reserves have 5 or 6 different nationalities that are inside that reserve. But in Cofán Bermejo, since we've got this format, we've been trying to figure out a way to keep the land together.
But then in this case, the Bermejo Reserve is probably our most conflictive. We've got miners, we've got illegal armed forces, we've got a little bit of everything in that area. And we've also got pressure from the colonization. We've got commercial hunters coming in.
It's a highly vulnerable piece of land because it's right on the border. There's a lot of, like my dad was mentioning, a lot of gold mining going on, and there's several of oil company platforms nearby, which means there's roads. So there's obviously access into these areas. So the lumbering companies want to take advantage of it, etc. And our Cofán communities up there aren't that big. They're actually the smallest communities, I think, of all our Cofán nations. So it's been an area where we've needed to help quite a bit. And before, when we had the park guard program running, we had the whole nation, supporting these communities. So they had the backing of all the other communities as well, which helped keep people out of there. But now, since the park guard program broke down, it's been a lot harder for them to control that line.
Definitely, the community itself definitely was feeling very, very strongly that they needed to reopen a version of the park guard program. So then when we approached in Azimuth and they were able to provide us with fund to begin to put park guards back out in the field, the community was very, very excited, the community as a whole. So that's kind of where we're at now. They completed their first boundary clearing just in December. And we were able to, just before that in November, we were able to have a kind of a refresher course that helped get everybody organized. And we were able to also get help from another NGO that's working in the area for food and transport.
And our hope is to also figure out a more sustainable way in the future so that they can continue to control their forests and at the same time provide work and living income for the people that are living there. Although they're small communities, they still got different needs that most Indigenous people have. Put their kids through school. A lot of the food they can't access anymore through the forest. And so that's what we've been kind of working on with them. And since the park guard program stopped, so it's been about 10 years. So the first thing that we had to do was clear the boundary trails because they were overgrown and people were making new boundary trails going inside the reserve, going inside our territory. What we've realized recently is that back when we made the boundary trails, we used, the technology that was available at that time. Today, the GPS are way more precise. So we've been slowly training our bunch to use these new technological equipment to rectify, their limits with their different neighboring communities. And at the same time, while we're working on that, we create a presence in those areas. Most of these communities, they don't, go all the way to the extent of their territory. When they go out hunting, they try to go to the nearby places. So a lot of the younger folks did not know where their limits were, where their territory expanded to. So we've been trying to create, a sense of ownership to a lot of the younger folks that didn't know their land until now.
No government, no NGO, nobody else is going to be able to do what our indigenous community is going to be able to do. In the process, yes, you are helping us directly because it's our territory. It's the place that we live off of. And you're also helping us in things like helping create and maintain our nationalism, helping create and maintain cultural attributes. But that was all internal. But then the external thing was that, all of a sudden these watersheds were clean. The miners were not able to put mercury into the water. The oil companies were on alert that they had to comply with Ecuadorian legal regulations if they were going to go into Cofán territory. They couldn't get away with sloppy work. They couldn't get away with clandestine hunting. None of this because we were going to be right there. The government world has not really come to grips, nor the business world have really come to grips with payments for environmental services. We're talking 1 million acres for a group of people who are only about 1,200 people in Ecuador altogether. And the individual communities, like Felipe is saying, the communities of Chandinay and Avier are both very, very small communities. We're not talking about an active Western style usage of land. It's not ours in the sense that we're going to cut it down and plant corn on it to make a profit. That land is a trust that, yes, we're the primary actors, we're the primary users and the primary beneficiaries, but we're also we're the primary guardians of it, but we're only part of the story. I mean, the reason why we need that 1 million acres isn't for the immediate food needs of the Cofán nation, it's for the environmental services this is providing for the entire world. And until we can get that across and begin to get people coming alongside of us in a real way, the economic situation is really, really, really tense for these people. And that's why something like the Park Guard program is viewed internally as, people don't make salaries, they just make a living allowance. And, but it is something that they can say, okay, now I have something to take care of my family with while I'm taking care of this, also taking care of this land that belongs not just to me, but to the entire world. We've got to really make get past the stereotype of we're just helping some Indians to preserve their culture out in the middle of no place. And I think just the whole Park Guard program, I mean, to do it effectively, it does need a constant budget to really be able to pull it off like we need to do. That's not just a priority for us as a people, nor for us as a Fundación, it's a priority for the world. So the projects that are actually coming from bottom up are few and far between, largely because they can't get the interest from the outside world, because they're presented in ways that the outside world is not willing to understand. So something like this park guide program is very, very dear to the hearts of the Cofán people. And the minute we offered it to other communities, it was amazing. We had Sequoias, we had Quichuas, we had Waurani, we had Chachi, we had campesinos just from an indigenous background, but from the mountains, that came and took the courses and were so excited about, oh, let's use this and let's do it. But they needed the funding. That's where it stopped, because the outside world wasn't willing to back the initiatives that the indigenous groups were doing. And you know, the other year when there were so many fires, I was saying, well, if they had bothered to put a little bit of money into park guard programs for all of the different indigenous groups in the area, none of it would have ever happened. You know, they could have controlled it easily. But that's also scary for the outside world, because it means is that indigenous people are all of a sudden taking charge. There's this deep-rooted fear of indigenous groups actually taking on an active role and actually being able to make their own decisions.